All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you!
This is my boomstick!
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And this week we are going to take a break from doing ghosts with our month of the monsters. And we are going to hit something that a lot of people are talking about right now. We did this last month with Late Night with the Devil. And we're, occasionally you got to take breaks. You got to strike while the iron's hot on certain things. And this movie that we are going to be doing this week is Lisa Frankenstein, the newest entry into the movie verse and the genre by Diablo Cody.
Yeah.
So we knew that there was a lot of leeway here for this to go one way or the other. There's a lot of really polarizing opinions about Diablo Cody out there. So we are going to start with a section that we're calling It's Alive. And Dave, tell us your initial thoughts about Lisa Frankenstein. Right?
So here's where I am. And I'm hoping that I can kind of work through my thoughts over the next hour and 15 minutes because I am a fan of Diablo Cody. I don't understand people who don't like Diablo Cody.
I don't either.
I don't get it. I know that there is a segment of society that has no love for her, and I don't understand it. I think legitimately Juno is one of the best written movies I've ever seen.
So damn funny.
And I think that Jennifer's Body is one of the most fun movies I've ever seen.
Absolutely.
Now, granted, these movies came out a while ago, but Diablo Cody hasn't stopped making movies. And I think that she's a rather fantastic writer who really captures that sort of authentic movie realism. It's very much like John Hughes. Like, no one actually talks like how people talk in a John Hughes movie, but that's how people talk in the movie world.
Right.
And I think that she captures that perfectly. There is no way for me to point to what I think is wrong with this movie, which is kind of weird to say. And yet I have to say, I don't know why it is I don't like this movie. Question mark? Because I don't know if I like this movie. I know I didn't hate it. I know I didn't love it. And I know that for the first half, I was mostly disinterested. And for the second half, I found myself going, a little bit more. But the whole time, I thought production value was insanely good. I thought the acting was awesome. I thought the casting was great. I thought the music, the soundtrack was spectacular. It was just stellar. I loved all of the moments in this movie and felt like I was questioning, why don't I love it in this movie?
I went through something very similar. And I think I texted you that last night. I was like, I think my exact words were, this movie's stupid, but I don't hate it. Right. And I did not love it, but I didn't hate it either. I kind of settled on something today that I think kind of made it work for me. And I think that this movie, through a very weird set of circumstances, proved a lot about the power of nostalgia, because I think that one of the things that happened with this movie was, I think that this movie was just dead to rights, an 80s, fun horror movie. And I think that so much effort went into not only making this thing look 80s, but it felt 80s. I think that when you're referencing John Hughes and people like that, I think that that's spot on. I think that this movie went to great lengths to not just do the Stranger Things of, oh, this looks like the 80s, but everybody's talking like they do now. This is very slick and modern. There were a lot of things that we'll talk about when we get to production that made it feel like it was made in the 80s. And that definitely seemed to be what they were going for. So I think that the problem comes in with a lot of times you go back and you pick one of those movies from the 80s that we love and you show them to somebody new and they're like, I don't get it. Like, I don't think that it's amazing or anything like that. And then you go, well, yeah, well, we talked about this a couple weeks ago. Well, yeah, because you're watching it through your, 30, 40-year-old eyes. You didn't see this as a kid when it was all relevant. And now it holds something for you. I think that
that's a powerful thing, man.
And I think that this movie puts so much effort into feeling like one of those movies that without the power of nostalgia to back it, then you only see it for what it is, which is some interesting quippy one-liners, a story that carries. It makes just enough sense when it does. And you kind of just see all those pieces, but you need those childlike eyes to kind of sew this thing together. And so I think that without that, it's missing what makes us hold on to those movies the way that we do. And that's just the fact that they are an integral part of making who we are. And so I think that while this movie definitely set out to look and feel very nostalgic, I think that it also created a roadmap for how dangerous it can be to play with nostalgia, because they tried to create like a false sense of that. And that's where it fell flat, because I'm kind of right there with you. I didn't hate it. I laughed solidly a couple of times. I mean, this movie got some really good laughs out of me. And there were some great characters. The dialogue was fantastic. It was just, when it was all said and done, I needed this thing to have come out in the 80s so that I would have experienced it when I was younger, and it would have been some sort of touchstone thing for me, instead of just desperately trying so hard to create that while being new.
I think, I don't know that this movie will ever achieve that status, for one reason and one reason alone, which is that when Juno was made, Juno was Juno, and it wasn't trying to be anything other than what it was. But I feel like this movie is a movie that has parts that are always greater than the whole.
Right.
And it's because of the fact that there's so much homage, which I love homage. And if you watch this movie and don't immediately, and I mean within the first couple of seconds, think Tim Burton,
right,
then you've never seen movies before, which is fine. If you've never seen a Tim Burton movie, that's okay, but please rectify that.
Yeah, do something about
that.
But
that's what, like, I feel like even Tim Burton movies haven't tried to be as Tim Burton-y as this movie has. And John Hughes movies haven't tried to be as John Hughesy as this movie has. And I think a lot of that, and I hate to say this about someone who's like, it's their directorial debut, but I think a lot of that goes to the fact that we have a director's freshman feature film, and she's still trying to figure out what her voice is. And if her voice is homage, I mean, that's totally fine, because that's what like the Zucker brothers and Abrams did, and that's what Mel Brooks did. You know, like their voice is aping on classics.
Right.
That's okay. But I don't think this movie quite takes the same satirical tone as those do, because it's not a spoof. I think that this is a true reimagining of the Frankenstein story for a different generation. But which generation is that for?
That's
Because
and that
if
yeah.
if it's for our generation, the generation that grew up watching Burton and Hughes, then I think they missed the point. But if this is for today's youth, if this is for your Gen Alphas, if this is for your Gen Zs, are they going to appreciate the 80s nostalgia the same way that I think the intention is? And I don't know. So I think in the end that this is a movie that kind of languishes in its own homage because it doesn't really have its own voice.
Right. And I think that that what you said there is spot on. Yeah, who is this movie for? And that was the question that this movie was never able to answer. It just kind of sat in this like middling territory of like making its own fresh, funny jokes and doing things or referencing things, like you mentioned Tim Burton. I mean, there were shots out of this that it was like just straight. It's like, oh, that's a Beetlejuice
Edward
shot.
Scissorhands.
Yeah,
that's Beetlejuice. Yeah.
And you're gonna have plenty of people who are gonna watch this that have never seen those. And like I said, again, those are great if you recognize the homage. But if you don't, then there are parts of this that you're probably just thinking are horribly cheesy or just ridiculously corny. And because if you're missing those things, whereas if you're catching them, you're just being bombarded with them. It's nonstop. And you're right. I think that is more a Zelda Williams thing than it is a Diablo Cody thing because the dialogue here, the story makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's decently fresh. It's kind of my boyfriend's back, right? But it's changed and it's interesting. So I do think that this movie not having an identity of its own is a problem here.
Yeah. So, I mean, we kind of got into it a little bit here. So let's really dive in. So in a section we're calling Teenage Frankenstein, little tip of the hat to Alice Cooper here.
Yes, sir.
What did you think of the story?
So I honestly, I remember this movie being a blip on the radar when it came out. And then it started streaming last week and I was seeing little bits about it here and there. And I was like, oh, I did have some interest in that. I mean, and we're talking about this nostalgia down to the fact that it's called Lisa Frankenstein, like down to the title. This thing is supposed to be homage / nostalgic. So we've got
and Lisa Frank is for everyone, by the way. All right, and that's not just a bullied third grader.
I was going to say
saying that
spoken like a man whose grandmother bought him a trapper keeper he didn't ask for and had to defend that for days on. No, I like the dolphins. I think they're cool.
Quite the reverse. Spoken like a man who asked for it and then got raked when he got to school and then was like, I don't know why they got me this.
So we have the story of Lisa, a girl who, again, classic 80s trope, fish out of water, had to move her senior year. She's having to have a brand new high school. She doesn't get along with anybody. She's not a jock. She's more of an Ally Sheedy. She's less of a Molly Ringwald. Mm-hmm. Right. And so she's trying to figure out, she's got this, I will say she's this really tragic backstory. The fact she saw her mom get axe murdered, as it's said in the movie. And I was
funny. Yeah.
Exactly. Credit where credit's due. Again, this is Diablo Cody being Diablo Cody. Like they present that part of that part of the movie, and it was funny. Mm-hmm. And so she loves the cemetery. She's got this one particular grave that she hangs out at, and through a Freaky Friday style wish and some ball lightning, this guy ends up coming back to life. And now she's got a built-in best friend and they're just trying to figure out life together. But she also is still trying to bang the editor of the Lit Mag and he's just kind of there. I will say this movie took a lot of weird twists and turns. I had no idea what to expect. That first time when he kills Carlo Gugino with the sewing machine caught me completely off guard. Right. And then you see he's trying to get pieces of his body that didn't make it back. So they're sewing on parts of the body. They're using this malfunctioning tanning bed. Like I said at the top, I think the story here is very functional. I think it's a lot of fun. I think that when you storyboard this movie, you're looking at a lot of fun set pieces. You're looking at things that keep people excited. You're looking at really cashing in on all of those moments that, like you said, come from so many other movies. So I get that part of it. Where this falls apart is when it needs something that is specifically its own in between all of these pieces. And the story gets tedious at a point because you're all like, there came a point in this movie where I was just going like, oh, okay, yeah, no, this makes sense because it's from, that movie, like you kind of get tired of connecting those dots at a certain point. But the story itself, I think, is a lot of fun. I think that it's decently original. I think that they did a very good job telling a complete story arc for Lisa. It's a very bizarre one. It's a very bizarre one from fish out of water girl who just accidentally gets drugged at a party to accomplice to a murder, to straight up planning the murder, to then deciding she wants to lose her virginity, to then deciding the only way to avoid the consequences for all of this is to die. It's a very bizarre arc, but it felt complete. And so because the story did a very good job of taking me through all of that. And I think that credit definitely goes to this movie shows that Diablo Cody can write the shit out of a movie. She understands storytelling. She understands what's funny and how to keep people on their toes about certain things. But there are parts where it just kind of falls apart. You use the word disinterested. And I did find myself in that place a lot where, I just had a really good laugh, but now we're back to this really bland, downtone area of film where I'm just I know what's going to happen next. Like, let's get to it or give me something exciting until I get to it.
It's weird because that is how I feel. And yet I disagree a little bit with what you're saying. I don't think this is an original story. I think that it's an original rebranding of a story because Lisa Frankenstein is more than just a witty, play on Lisa Frank.
Right.
It is going back to the original I created a monster story, and it's doing it in a different way. So, like, off the top of my head, whether it's Upgrade or Reanimator or Weird Science or Frankenweenie, like, these movies are essentially Mary Shelley's original idea, which is I brought something to life and now I have to teach it how to be whole.
Right.
And in the process, either it will teach me how to be whole or tragedy ensues, right? Because that's ultimately what the Frankenstein story is. It's why the Frankenstein story can be adapted in so many different ways. And I think that the one that this most closely sticks to is Edward Scissorhands, which, aside from the original Frankenstein and Bride of Frankenstein, I think is the best adaptation of Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And if you disagree, you can be wrong. It is your right as a human being to be wrong. You can. It's a privilege that we have. So it's not original.
Okay. I see where you're coming from with that.
I think that in changing a few things, it then becomes a fresh take on a tried and true story, because in the creature, I mean, does he have a name?
No, he is literally listed in the credits as the creature.
The creature. The creature is essentially Edward from Edward Scissorhands. It is Frankenstein's monster in Frankenstein. It is this thing, and it really only serves the purpose for its creator to learn about itself and trying to teach the creature everything, right? The hope is that it will, the inventor will learn anything in the process of teaching the creature everything.
Right.
And I think that Lisa does. I think that she does. She learned something about herself, and she learned something about the way the world works. And I really enjoyed the process of her getting there. I also really enjoyed that she was, for lack of a better term, nobody.
Yeah.
It's part of what I really enjoyed about Edward Scissorhands too, is that Winona Ryder went from the somebody, from like the it girl, to being this outcast, and then rediscovered what it really meant to connect with people, because she was popular and everyone loved her, but did anyone really like her, and did she really appreciate any of those people? And I think that we see kind of like the reverse story happen here, where she knows that, Lisa knows that she's not popular. She knows that her story is tragic, and therefore, like, she's not socially unaware, but she learns to accept that that's okay along the way. So there is, I think, a really compelling character story within the plot here, and it's masterfully brought out by Diablo Cody. And the supporting cast here is great too, because I truly believe every character matters here. From someone like Carla Gugino, who is pretty much cast aside almost as soon as she's brought into the story,
right,
to the stepsister, who Taffy, who is she's fantastic, and she is really, for all intents and purposes, she is Winona Ryder, right, in Edward Scissorhands. But she's great. She's Winona Ryder at the end of the movie. Yeah. So like she kind of is the perfect girl, but she's not the hero of the story. And so I love the approach that was taken here in crafting the story, because it ends up being a story that is fun. It ends up being a story that I don't know if I necessarily want to rewatch, but a story that I don't mind talking about. Like I expected that while we were doing this, that like we always try to target an hour and 15 minutes.
Right.
Like, we're probably going to go to an hour. Maybe it'll go under an hour. But I'm finding that like I'm really enjoying talking about this and listening about this movie.
Yeah, it was funny. I paused the movie to get the timestamp at 5 minutes and 50 seconds into this movie, Taffy and Lisa are in the car, and I paused it when they started talking. I was like, all right, it's 5:50. And that was the exact moment where you're like, yep, this is a Diablo Cody film. Like, yeah, that's all it took. I mean, you got it. It's that same way that as soon as two characters start having a conversation, you know that it's a Kevin Smith film, right? Just the way that she writes dialogue. Yeah, exactly. The way that she writes dialogue shines through. And so but that didn't bother me. I didn't mind that, because I'm with you. I think that Juno is hilarious. I think that it's a masterpiece. I enjoy Jennifer's Body. I just rewatched it this past October for my 31 days of horror movies. I did Jennifer's Body for one of those, and I enjoy those. So it didn't bother me to just immediately be like, yep, this is definitely Diablo Cody. But it did not take long at all, which I'm fine with that, because we spent all this time talking about, trying to understand what your voice is. If you have that sort of presence, that two people just delivering lines that you wrote, it's that obvious that you wrote them. Yeah, then you definitely have that identity. So I do think that you're right in the fact that this is a Zelda Williams problem. And yes, this is her first movie. Not everybody can be, Ari Aster or Jordan Peele or all of these other people who we've done their directorial debuts.
In fact, almost no one is.
Right, exactly. So
go watch Dark Star. Listen, I love John Carpenter, and we've mentioned Dark Star once or twice already. Dark Star is not a good movie. It is enjoyable. It's enjoyable, and Dan O'Bannon is the fucking man.
Yeah,
because he certainly can write. But I think that every director starts somewhere, and to counteract that point, not even Ari Aster started at Hereditary, because Ari Aster made many short films before he got to Hereditary, and there's exactly 2 credits to Zelda Williams prior to this movie, and one is a short film, and I want to say the other one's a music video. I could be wrong about that.
I think it's a music video. I think you're right.
So
yeah. So, but so as the story is progressing, the moments that shine are those moments that are just so perfectly Diablo Cody written. My favorite, I think the first time that I laughed super hard was when the creature first shows up, and he just kind of falls down, and she finally calms down, realizes he's just trying to give her slipper, which I was already chuckling because he's walking around with this slipper. It's obvious he's just trying to give it back to her. I was laughing. But she sits down, and he's playing music, and she says, "Oh, do you like this song? What other kind of music do you listen to?" And she goes, "I've got The Cure." And he holds up his stump of his hand, and she goes, "Oh, no, not like that. They don't kill you." Well, they do, but it's more emotional. Just shit like that had me. I was laughing so hard at that particular part, because, and that's, I love The Cure. And so that was hilarious the way that it played out. There's a moment where she hears her stepmother coming home. Her stepmother's name is Janet. And so
the damn it, Janet.
Homage, she immediately yells, "Damn it, Janet," and then jumps up out of bed and throws him in the closet. That type of stuff. Yes, I know that I was the target audience for that, and I could appreciate it. I really could. So those were moments that definitely shined as the story went on, because, like I said, there was a lot of effort it put into making it feel like an 80s film. When they kill Janet and he cuts off her ear, and she's like, "Oh no, I can't do that." And then there's this, she pulls him, she pulls the creature up on her side, and they both get really wide-eyed and look at Janet's body and go, "Until we dispose of the body." And it's like,
it was the right amount of cheese.
It really was. And that exact moment, I was like, this shot could have been in Beetlejuice, and it would have made sense. That was the moment where I was like, Tim Burton, here we go. Keep them coming, right? So they did a lot of things that were fun like that with the story. But I see what you're saying. I do keep saying it's original. It's and it's not, because it is very true to the original Frankenstein. So I guess it's a very original way of telling that story.
And that's, I think, one of the saving graces in the movie, because when a movie doesn't have its own visual language, because I don't think this movie has its own visual language, when it doesn't have its own style, it really boils down to, well, does the story work? Because there's a number of movies, like we've all done this. Like, can you imagine Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford?
Right.
Because we all know Tom Selleck was originally got the part, but can you imagine it without him? No, not really. Right.
Yeah.
Can you imagine, to keep on Harrison Ford, Han Solo, other than Harrison Ford? And I know that he was played by what was his name? Heinrich, or Enric, or whatever his name was, in the Solo movie.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And I still can't imagine Han Solo without Harrison Ford. And I liked the Solo movie.
Right. Like, what if Tom Cruise had gotten that Iron Man casting?
Exactly.
And Robert Downey Jr. had never fallen perfectly into that role.
I think that there's movies like that. you know, and then you can say that about any one of the roles in the filmmaking aspect. Like, can you imagine Who Framed Roger Rabbit, but directed by someone other than Robert Zemeckis? I can't.
No.
Or a Star Wars directed by anyone other than George Lucas. I can't. Jaws without Spielberg. But I can imagine this movie directed by a couple of people.
Yeah.
Other than Zelda Williams. And that is not really her fault. This is her first feature film. So I want to keep reiterating that, because I know it sounds like we're getting really down on her, and maybe we are, but it's not like we're getting down on I don't know, John Carpenter or Wes Craven or something like that, because they all made turds at some point.
Yeah.
I've
seen they.
This is a freshman picture, and it feels like a freshman picture. The thing is that it's so good otherwise. And the story, I think, is where it really, really shines, and it carries this movie.
And I think that one other place that it really shines, something that we can really look to find some great things about this movie, is the characters in this movie. They feel they feel fresh. They feel great. So in a section we're calling Townies and Students, I mean, who stuck out for you in this movie?
Listen, man, they're all great. Like,
right.
I can't think of a single person where I was like, that person, what the fuck, you know, like, never once. But I think it's Liza Soberano who played Taffy. There was something about her, whatever the it factor is, she's got it. And I've never seen her in anything else, but I can't wait to see her in more stuff, because she managed to give you know, the it girl, and managed to give like emotionally insecure, and managed to give sure of herself, and managed to give like such a complex performance, and yet she's not the star. The person I most remember from this movie, and I saw this on Monday, it's Wednesday right now, so I've had a little while to mull this over. The person that most stuck out at me was Taffy. And she, I think she killed it as the best friend, as the sister, as the bad girl, but also as the good girl. Like, this was not an easy role to play. And I don't know who else I would have cast in that spot. Like, I really cannot think of anyone else that could have done that in her age group.
She was incredible in that role. My biggest question is Taffy her name? Is her name Taffadil? Well, what do you suppose, if Taffy is a nickname, what would you extrapolate that her actual name is?
Judging by her mother, Taffeta.
Taffeta. Okay, there we go. Taffeta makes sense than Taffadil, which is where I kept landing. Anyway,
Taffeta, for those that don't know, it's a really lightweight fabric that's used in a lot of like high-end clothing, like designer clothing. And so Carla Gugino, being someone who seems very much into like the finer things,
right,
and the fact that, you know, she has that home, because she mentions that she allows them into her home. Taffy has her own car. I would imagine that whoever her ex was, the mom's ex,
right,
had money. And as a way to kind of symbolize the luxury that she wanted for herself and for her daughter, that's where it came from. But I mean,
Taffeta makes more sense than, like I said, Taffadil. So we're gonna stick with that. I really did enjoy her role, because that was one where my expectations were subverted as to what I was going to get from her. As soon as I realized she was a stepsister, and also I had no problem believing that she was Miss Teen Hawaiian Tropic, by the way.
Oh, she's gorgeous.
Not a problem believing that for a second. So as soon as I find out she's the stepsister, she's the hot one, Lisa's the not one, right? As soon as I put that together, I kept waiting for that moment where it turns out that she was just an awful bitch. Right, because that's the 80s trope that I thought they were leaning into with their relationship. But I was pleasantly surprised to find out that she genuinely, she seemed to care about Lisa, and she did want the best for her. She wasn't keeping her friends around to just mock her or things like that. No, her friends played into that, that 80s popular girl role and not want anything to do with Lisa, but she did a very good job of countering what I thought was going to come with that role. So I really did enjoy that, and it all felt very natural for her. It never felt like she was just putting on because this was her stepsister. She came across as a genuinely caring human being who wanted the best for her stepsister. So I think that she did a stellar job. I would like to talk about Cole Sprouse as the creature here. Cole Sprouse has come a long way since I Can Wipe My Own Ass, right?
Yes, he has. Which, incidentally, he couldn't do it at the beginning of this movie because he's missing a hand.
Yeah, exactly. We, for all we know, I Can Wipe My Own Ass would have been a very good exclamation for the creature in this movie. It would have been a revelation after getting that hand back, right? So, but he did a really good job. This dude did not talk until the very final scene of this movie. And yet I never doubted what he was going through. I never wondered like, oh, I wonder what he's thinking. I didn't need that. I knew what he was thinking. I knew how he was playing in. I knew that he had fallen in love with Lisa, because yes, he murders her stepmother, but he does it in defense. Janet is talking about how she is going to put Lisa in an institution. And so he hits her with what he had, and it was a sewing machine. Yes, we didn't talk about it when we were doing the story. There's this real minor storyline of revenge of this dude copped a feel on Lisa when she was when she was under the influence of maybe PCP. And so they decide, oh, you need a hand? Well, this guy's using his for the wrong thing, so fuck him.
Yeah.
And, again, very Diablo Cody, right? That's straight out of Jennifer's body.
Right.
And so, but he goes along with that plot. Yes, he's going to get a hand out of it, but he then murders the guy just because, fuck that guy. I love her, and she told me about the awful things that you did, and you're done now. It's a very Victorian sense of justice.
Yeah.
And so I didn't need him to talk for any of that to come across. I was super impressed with, once I realized who Cole Sprouse was, my initial thought, I was like, I know that name. And like, we're watching this, and my girlfriend's like, oh yeah, no, it's the from Sweet Life. And I was like, I've never seen that. She goes, oh, it's the kid from it's Ben from Friends and the kid from Big Daddy. I was like, there we go. References I get. I missed the Sweet Life of Zach and Cody.
Well, it's a little bit after your time.
Yeah, a little bit. I was and so once I realized who it was, I was super impressed, because yes, I'm sure there's a lot between Friends and this for Cole Sprouse, but I don't know any of it. So the bar for this on me was Ben from Friends, and he did a great job with that. But it's always impressive when somebody can physically act this well, when somebody doesn't have to deliver lines or there's yes, what he did was scripted, but none of it was like part of the written script. There were no lines. He relied solely on the way he moved, his expression and things like that to get his point across. And I think he did a great job with that.
I agree 100%. I was torn between who to mention first, and I didn't even know who I was going to say when I started to say Taffy, because I almost said the creature.
Yeah.
And I'm with you 100%. Now, he is someone who I have been watching pretty much his entire career because I'm not like a Cole Sprouse super fan or anything, but obviously Big Daddy was a big deal, right?
Right.
Friends was a gigantic deal for our generation. This is something that, you know, on Thursday nights we crowded around the TV as groups of friends and watched Friends. On top of that, I have a sister who is about 10 years younger than I am, and she was a gigantic fan of The Sweet Life with Zach and Cody.
Right.
And so I, as an older brother trying to be a good older brother, would often sit and watch TV with her and try to take an interest in the things that she was listening to and the things she was watching, the games she was playing, and found that I was like, oh, that's that kid from Big Daddy. That's the kid from Friends. He's really funny here. And so is his brother. That's when I finally realized I'm like, oh shit, yeah, like labor laws, you have to have like twins if you're gonna have this one character who's a child in any significant portion of your production. And I was like, damn, this kid's funny. This kid's good. He can act. And then later on Riverdale, he plays Jughead. And this was a show that my wife and I got really, really into. And it's not the sort of Archie that we are all familiar with from Archie's comics. The characters are all the same, but this is more in the vein of like Archie Afterlife.
And it's like Archie and Twin Peaks had a baby, right?
That's exactly what it is. And I am a huge Twin Peaks fan. I mean, anything that is David Lynchian, I'm into. And that show had it. And Jughead was, in a lot of ways, the central character, because even though Archie is obviously like, he's Archie, Jughead is like the investigator on that show. So he's the guy who's like writing in the newspaper with Betty. And they're the ones that really instigate all of the stuff that we as the audience go along the ride for. And he does a really, really great job on that show. A fantastic job. Skeet Ulrich plays his dad.
Oh, okay.
So, which I think is a fantastic casting. So when I saw that he was in this, I'm like, man, you know what? I'm in for him alone, because Catherine Newton, I have seen her before, but I couldn't tell you what off the top of my head. As soon as I click on her page, I'm going to be like, oh, that's right. Oh, Freaky. There you go.
There we go.
Yeah, and she's in the new Abigail movie, and she was in one of them Paranormal Activity movies. So like, she's someone whose like face I recognize, but that was not the draw for me. It was Diablo Cody. It was Cole Sprouse.
Yeah, he did a really great job. I would, like I said, and I Riverdale, another one I missed, right? So there was just plenty in there. So everything he did was shocking to me, but I really enjoyed him. I think that when we look at other characters, you know, those are the ones that really, you know, when you've got Lisa, and I think that with Lisa, you get this really interesting take on like, what if Winona Ryder was still like making with these movies, right? Like what if what if Winona Ryder was making these movies and trying to make them exactly like she did in the 80s? Like everything she did just dripped Winona Ryder. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a Winona Ryder super fan. And so I was totally on board with the way that she gave the performance. I loved the way that it was a very quick change into girl who was confident in herself. And I appreciated that. And I think that she pulled that off very well. You know, she, as soon as I saw her, like, I just very recently finished rewatching all of the Paranormal Activity movies. So as soon as I saw her, I was like, oh man, yeah, it's the girl from Paranormal Activity 4. Cool. Like, let's go. And so I think that she did a really good job. I really loved how she didn't delight necessarily in what was happening, but she seemed to have fun with it. Like, it wasn't something, it never crossed that line into like fetish, where a lot of times when you're watching somebody who's just getting comfortable with murder, there's always like a weird sexual element to it where it starts to seem like it's filling some sort of hole in their life because they don't have a significant other or whatever.
Like a natural born killers or something like that.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the fact that as she very quickly got used to the idea of murdering people, that it seemed to be, she was like, okay, yes, I was an accomplice in my stepmother, that one made sense. Yes, I didn't know you were going to kill that guy that groped me, but fuck him. And she enjoyed it and she was empowered by it, but it never took that weird turn that would have made it something super awkward, that would have been very counterflow to the vibe of everything that this movie had created. So I think that she played that very well. She did, she kind of spiraled out of control there towards the end, and it was very believable. I really enjoyed her in this role. What's interesting is the fact that, yes, this movie's called Lisa Frankenstein, but I really do feel like Lisa is, third banana here. Like when it comes to characters that I'm remembering 24 hours removed from this movie.
Yeah. I do kind of feel the same way. But she also does play her kind of meek at the beginning. So I don't know if that's kind of by design. But I do feel like the performance is not as memorable. It's, I think, it might have to do with homage, like we were saying before, because she is so like many Winona Ryder characters, because we've all seen Heathers, right?
Right.
And we've all seen Beetlejuice, and we've all seen Edward Scissorhands, and Lisa Frankenstein is kind of like an amalgamation of all those things. And it works. It's not that it doesn't work, but when I think of her performance, I'm thinking she did that Winona Ryder thing really well.
Yeah, exactly.
Not she did that Catherine Newton thing really well, as opposed to, say, like Liza Soberano, who did the Liza Soberano thing really well. Like, Taffy was Taffy, and I can't really think of another character in another movie that would have been like that. And granted, when you are remaking a classic story, there has to be something that tethers that story to the ones that came before. And unfortunately, I think Lisa is that character here, where, she is the Dr. Frankenstein. She is, what was her name in Edward Scissorhands? But Winona Ryder's character in Edward Scissorhands, she does kind of play that, like the mentor character who does the learning herself. Whereas I think like this is more of a fresh take on the creature than all those other things. So as we're talking about that, let's just talk about the creature. We talked about Cole Sprouse as an actor, his performance here, but the representation of the creature here. Did this work for you, this like Victorian gentleman?
So that was one thing that kept that plagued me for the entire movie, right? Does this feel like Frankenstein's monster? Right. So you start going back through and you're thinking of all the, you're like, okay, well, you got Boris Karloff, you got Robert De Niro. Obviously, yes, you got your Edward Scissorhands. And I even thought about Frankenweenie and all of these other things that we've talked about. And I started to kind of think to myself about how this stacked up to all of those others. And I don't, I definitely don't think that he's, that this particular version of Frankenstein is out here doing it better than Boris Karloff or Robert De Niro in those. But I do think that there's a strong case for this representation of the creature to be right in par with all of those ones that are made that aren't just directly called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I think that he deserves a place in that conversation with those others that we've talked about. I think that it's a pretty true representation of Golem in the fact that not only was he brought back to life because of her desire, but that then he assumed this protector role very quickly, which is the origins of the Golem. And a long time ago, back before Shiver, when we were doing Rush for one time, we had a whole conversation about whether or not Frankenstein is a zombie
versus Golem
versus a Golem, and we eventually settled on Golem, and I still think that we're in the right place with that.
But because that's correct, that's not even like opinion.
Yeah, and so I think
he's assembled. Damn it! I mean, like, what other argument do you need?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that he is. I think that there's room for this creature in that conversation with the others. I think that making him this Victorian gentleman, he's very proper. He doesn't try to make a move on her. The only reason anything escalates is because she puts it out there. So he's playing this very proper Victorian gentleman, very Jane Austen style Victorian gentleman, and he that comes across very clearly. So I think that they did a very good job of sticking true to the creature, the Frankenstein's monster mythos, while also creating a character that stands on his own amongst these others that we've talked about.
I agree. And for me, the thing that has kept me thinking about this movie most in the last 48 hours is one specific thing about this creature that I don't know if it was a throwaway gag from Cody. I don't know if my whole shtick is I overanalyze things, right?
Right.
Does this love story happen if this creature has a dick?
Fair.
All right, go with me on this journey. Okay?
I will.
Every other male character in this movie is concerned with sex in some way.
Right.
So there's was Doug his name, right? The one that molests her.
Oh yeah, the one that groped her at the party.
Exactly.
Yes, Doug, her lab partner.
So right. Then there is what's the name of the
Mike Trent?
Mike Trent. Yeah, she only said his name like a billion times. Mike Trent, right? And Mike Trent is not interested in her sexually, but he is interested in exploiting her because he's using her. But he doesn't find her attractive because he sees her as an intellectual equal and someone who he would have no power over. So he goes to Taffy, right? So there is some sort of sexual thing there, right? Now, I might be reading into this, but her dad is also a very sexual dude. And he latches.
Explain.
He not with her. Not with her.
Oh yeah, no. I'm just waiting for any explanation.
I never got that. But he talks about Kokomo and all of that, like with Gino when he's leaving like she hasn't even been found yet. And the thing he's thinking about is like, hey, glad you're safe. It's, hey, since you're in town, why don't we fuck?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And then maybe I'm reading into it, but I got the feeling when they're both visiting Lisa's grave that there was something between him and Taffy.
Maybe
I'm just reading into it. I didn't see that part of the movie with Steph because she had checked out already. She was like, hey, listen, I'm not really into this thing. I was like, I got to finish watching this. I would love to get her take on this because my wife has, I think, good intuition when it comes to reading those sorts of things. And then we come to the creature. And the creature clearly has an interest in her romantically, but he has an inability to act on that.
Right.
How does that relationship flourish if he does have his manhood? Because when he attacks Mike Trent, he doesn't chop off his head. He doesn't, take the axe to like center mass, which is what an axe killer would probably do. I'm not an axe killer, so I don't know. But I'm assuming that you're going to go for the kill shot, right? But he very meticulously chops off the Franken beans.
Surgically with a hand axe.
Right. And then when she comes back to him and she finds him and she finds out that there is no unit, she's like, oh, that's okay. There's other things we can do. And then he presents her with the unit. That's where sparks fly then. Because she didn't see him as someone that, even before she knew that he didn't have a dick, she didn't see him as someone who could satisfy her in that way. What she suggests is that he used the vibrator, not himself. So I think this is the most interesting thing about the movie is what is Cody trying to say about how men and women interact with each other romantically. When you remove sex from the equation, is there an opportunity to truly forge relationships? Or do we as a species, men as a species, allow ourselves to be controlled by the small head so much that the big head never allows itself to really form a bond with someone and gets in the way of the greater sex forging a bond with us? And I think that is one of the most interesting. It is the most interesting thing for me in this movie. So I don't know if I'm reading into this. I don't know. I mean, I have to be. I have to be reading into this. But I feel like if I'm picking up on it, there might be just a suggestion of it there.
I think that's masterfully put. I especially because he never, even when he was learning that he could get body parts back, and you go to the fact that the very first thing he gets is an ear. So now you're looking at, oh, okay, well now he can hear her, and then she makes a comment about him being such a great listener.
Yeah,
and he never pushes that subject until he realizes that that's what she wants. He's very put out when she brings up the fact that she's going to go have sex with Mike Trent. And so he doesn't allow that to become a driving factor in their relationship until he realizes that that's what she wants out of the relationship. So I didn't think about that until what you just put out there. But I think that what you just said makes perfect sense because of the fact that he was content to just carry on with the way that they were going. He was happy to play the piano and get her singing, and he was enjoying all of those things. The drive to get a penis came because she wanted penis. As soon as she made it a point that the next goal in her life was getting dick down, then he was like, well, then that's obviously what I need next. And so he went out there, and he not only did he go out there and get one, he went out there and got the one she wanted specifically.
Yeah.
And it was about making her happy. You never got the feeling that he went out and got himself a penis because he just wanted a penis. We've got a friend of the show, Greg, from out in California, chiming in that this is why I follow the podcast. I need you guys to break these things down for me. We're here for you and all of your penis-related inquiries. And so, the drive wasn't that he wanted sex. The drive was that she wanted sex, and he wanted to be the one to provide that for her. And I didn't think about all of that until you said that. So I don't think you're reading into it too much. I think that I think that you saw through the matrix there and picked up on something that probably went over a lot of people's heads. So that was awesome.
Nice. Thank you.
So, we've talked about it at the beginning here. We're going to move into a section where let's talk about the production of this thing, because for all of the faults that we've mentioned in this movie, one place where it does not mess up, I've got one little place where it messed up, is in the production of this movie. So take me through some of the things that made this movie. I mean, what made you go to that at the beginning to say that this is beautiful and the production of it is great?
Well, I think that this movie had a very competent producer. The producer's job in a movie, for those who are not into like the actual movie making process, is to basically put people together and to say, this director is going to work really well with this screenwriter, who's going to work really well with this production designer, who's going to work really well with this cinematographer. And I think that all of the moving parts here work, except that they don't work as a whole. I think
exactly.
I think that each part is spectacular. It's fantastic. It's almost like if you open up a watch, like every cog, every gear needs to fit perfectly. Like the teeth need to fit in there, and the thing just needs to function, right? But at the end of its production, there needs to be that one person who looks the whole thing over and says, yeah, this thing works. And I think that's what this was missing, is that the person at the helm, which is why the ultimate blame, I think, lies with the director here. There are lots of great parts to this movie, and there's lots of great parts in the filmmaking of this movie, but it doesn't fit together for me.
Yeah, this Mason Novick did this, produced this with Diablo Cody. He also
and produced almost everything of hers.
Yeah, Jennifer's Body, Juno, all the ones that we keep referencing. The two of them did those together. But I do think that this one is the miss. Some things that were great though. So not long into this movie, I knew that I was going to be in it for at least the visuals. Because that scene where she comes out of the room before that guy can assault her further, she comes out of the room. We get this amazing cover of "I Can See Clearly" playing in the background, performed by Elise McQueen, doing this really creepy cover of "I Can See Clearly." And there's this beautiful shot where she's wandering through the hall of this house party, and it slowly starts to turn into the cemetery, but it's still a house, and you're just getting moss on the walls and things like that. And you get this beautiful, beautiful shot that ends with her at the creature's grave. Once I saw that shot, I was like, okay, I'm here for this. That was gorgeous. Absolutely love that. The scene later on where when they finally have sex, and instead of giving us some sort of weird, possibly gross, gratuitous sex scene, we get the animated thing of it going through the what's it called, A Trip to the Moon. That first, the first film, we get like the animated version of that. That was really cool. The scene before she wakes up, where she kind of starts to come to, but she's in a dream still, and she's in this Victorian place with the big hair, and it's all in black and white. All of those things made this movie stand out as just absolutely gorgeous. I loved all of those decisions. I thought that they were phenomenal. I loved there were most of this soundtrack I think was put together very, very well. The one glaring miss on this for me is that JoJo cover of I Can't Fight This Feeling that played at the end was so bad. It was so bad. And I was when they sang that, when she sang that song while he played it on piano, I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna come back, and we're gonna get this great moment at the end with REO Speedwagon just killing it, right? And then we're just treated to this subpar cover by JoJo, who, top of my head, I got nothing for you, right? Like, I don't know. I know the name, and it's not JoJo Siwa, which was my first thought when I found her. But it was just this really lame subpar cover. Other than that one blemish, I feel like when you're watching and you're listening to this movie, those parts are great. And that's what keeps you there. Even when you're kind of disinterested with what's happening with the story, or you're just kind of slowly putting stuff together, or it's building at an odd pace. The fact that this thing looks pretty all throughout, the fact that we get these great shots, the use of those weird dream sequences and those animation sequences, that stuff really, really shines with this movie. And I liked that. I really, really liked, like, those were my favorite scenes, were those ones where we were kind of taken out of that reality and put into this weird Lisa Frankenstein place. I really loved those.
You know what I think would have worked really well with the REO Speedwagon song? What Stranger Things did with Journey, where they took the original vocals from the master and then like re-edited the track.
Yes.
And they nostalgified it.
Yeah.
That's what I think they probably should have done there. And I think it would have worked amazingly.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that would have worked a lot better. So you know, the one other thing, and it was just a super nerdy thing that might not have meant anything to a lot of people who watch this, but as Frankenstein and Hammer horror fans, that keyhole like squeeze at the end, man, that was so picture perfect. They didn't overuse it. They waited till the very end. It really sold everything about what they were trying to do with this movie at the end. So I do think that a lot of this production stuff, where ultimately, yes, it is on the producer to realize that the sum of these parts was the whole of this was not equal to the sum of its parts. And that is a miss. But I do think that they did a good job of putting these pieces together. It just didn't happen.
Yeah. And that leaves us just with one final thing, which is to rate this movie. And hopefully you're not new to Shiver. Hopefully you're a return Shiverite. We haven't really ever named our listeners.
Haven't.
Shivery.
Shiverer.
A shiverer.
Shiverer.
That's shiverer. That's hard to say, but I'm going to go with that one. So hopefully you'll return shiverer.
There's an episode in our near future, since we're both about to go on summer break, where whiskey's going to be involved, and we won't be able to say shiverer.
So if you are a first-time shiverer, then this is going to be weird. We don't use stars. We only ever rate a movie against itself, not against anything else. So we've talked about a lot of different Frankenstein style movies. We're not rating this against those other movies. We're only rating it against itself. So we use a unique rating system for every single movie. And Daniel and I spoke at the beginning of the show before we went on air, and we decided that what we were going to use was sewn on penises. Yep. So Daniel, and we're not using severed penises because there are severed penises in other movies, but we don't know any other movie that has sewn on penises.
Exactly.
Except I guess if you're watching any one of those John Wayne Bobbitt pornos, then there is a real
there's
sewn-on
a
penis.
little, but it
Yeah.
doesn't get sewn on in those. But that is an actual sewn on penis. Yes.
Yeah. The only time you will ever see a penis being sewn onto anyone's body,
It's in Lisa Frankenstein.
in Lisa Frankenstein, pushing boundaries in more ways than once. So, out of a possible 5 sewn-on penises, how many sewn-on penises do you give this?
Shit, man, I don't know. So there's a lot of really great things about this movie. There really are, and I think that we have done a good job of highlighting those things. There's even a couple extra little just fun things. At one point, she mentions that she got the vibrator from her Aunt Shelley. Right. There's fun little stuff like that. There are more bright spots than dark spots. So the next question becomes like, do I plan on watching this again? Nah, I've seen it. I'm good. But would I recommend this to people? I might. There's some fun. There's some goofiness here. There are some people where I might be like, it's worth a watch. It's worth exactly one watch. Mm-hmm. And so, I get into this weird space. And so I think ultimately where I land on this is I think 4 is too high. But I think that 3 isn't giving it enough credit for how smart Diablo Cody's writing is. I don't think that 3 is giving it enough credit for the performance that Cole Sprouse gave us as the creature. So I think that to do this the proper amount of justice, I've got to land right in the middle at 3.5 sewn on penises.
I'm right there with you. I'm going to give this 3 sewn on penises and a chub. and it's for all the reasons that you talked about. Really, this should be a better movie.
Right.
And I think that we figured out why it isn't, but even within that, I'm not satisfied with that response. And I will say this, I am really looking forward to whatever Zelda Williams has coming up.
Yeah.
Because I think that there is some real talent here. And I think that you don't get good performances out of your actors unless you're a good director. And I think that at the very least, she did that. And I think that she got some really great performances out of people here. So, and maybe I'm wrong. And maybe Zelda Williams has no blame to shoulder for why this movie didn't work. Maybe it's something else. And I'm just not seeing it. But I am excited nonetheless for whatever project she has coming up next. And I hope that there is a next, because I ultimately did enjoy this. I really enjoyed talking about this. And how often do you get to see a penis sewn onto someone?
Right. So
almost never.
Almost. I mean, depending on your field, there's like one specific line of work where you see it all the time, and then no one else ever sees it, right?
Yeah. And why should they have all the fun?
So there you have it. A unanimous 3.5 sewn on penises for Lisa Frankenstein. Greg chiming in saying, I broke the rules and didn't see this one yet, so who's counting on us for a rating? No pressure. So we're still leaving you in the lurch there. It's 3.5. It's still up to you, right? We're not giving it a glowing recommendation, but we're saying you might enjoy it. Ultimately, I think that when you get to that 3.5, that becomes a movie that's going to be very much about personal opinion. I do think that there's room for just about anybody to watch this if you're, hungover on a Saturday, or just something that you're, a throwaway movie on the weekend because you don't have much going on. I think that there's a place for it. I would just also venture to say that, Greg, you will probably watch it once and then you'll be like, okay, well, I've seen it. Cool. Let's move on. So anyway, thank you to Greg and everybody who's been watching today. We've seen our numbers get up a little bit today. So we really appreciate everybody who's been out there watching. If you are not following us on social media, make sure you head to shiverpod.com, where you can find links to all of our social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, all of those places at ShiverPod. Instagram, where we are the most, where we're the most active. I finally figured out downloading YouTube videos and putting the whole videos on our Instagram today. Welcome to the future, Daniel. And so check us out. We posted the video for what looks like a bizarre new occult film called Long Legs, starring Nicolas Cage, coming out soon. Which also, since he's watching and listening, let me give him his flowers. Greg is the one who pointed that out to me. I got up this morning to a text message from Greg being like, yo, you've got to check out Long Legs. So thank you, Greg. As you probably saw, it immediately made our Instagram. Looks very interesting. We try to post memes, keep you updated on what the next movie is going to be, and some videos, just some things like that. Always feel free to share that, comment. Let us know what you think. Also, if you're listening, if you watch us on YouTube, if you listen on Spotify, whatever social media outlet you have, if you wouldn't mind giving us a share, right? We had a minute where we were starting to break through that static. We're kind of back down to just our base fans now. Tell one person about us that you think will enjoy us, and tell them to follow us and let us know what they think. Tell them to let us know if they think we suck. We just want the interactions, right? So we will be getting back to the month of the ghost next week, and we're going to finish strong. Dave, how are we finishing the month of the ghost next week?
We're finishing with a movie that I cannot believe that in all the years that we've been doing this, in 128 episodes, we have not done Poltergeist.
Hell fucking yes.
Yeah.
It is well past due that we get to Poltergeist, one of the best and scariest movies if you saw it when you were a child like we did.
Mm-hmm.
It's also still stands up as a scary movie, but we will get to it and all of its amazingness next week. So make sure you tune in. Next week, we'll also make the announcement of what June is going to be as we continue the year of the monster. So thank you guys to everyone who's out there listening.
Absolutely. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.